Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the viewing port of her small ship as it approached Nexus Prime. The planet looked like a giant crystal floating in space. Its surface sparkled with millions of lights from cities that stretched across entire continents. She had seen pictures before, but seeing it with her own eyes made her feel very small. "Amazing, isn't it?" said Dr. Marcus Webb, her science advisor. He joined her at the window. "They say this planet was grown, not built. The crystalline dominion shaped it from raw matter over 10,000 years. Sarah nodded but felt nervous. Earth had worked for 50 years to develop faster-than-light travel. They thought it was a huge achievement. Now she was about to meet civilizations that have been traveling between stars for millions of years. Their ship, the U.S. Endeavor, was tiny compared to the vessels around Nexus Prime. Massive ships from hundreds of different species filled the space around the planet. Some looked like living creatures with organic curves. Others were perfect geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. A few seemed to be made of pure energy held together by invisible forces. "Incoming transmission," announced Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. "The Nexus Control Authority is directing us to Docking Bay 774. As their ship moved through the traffic lanes, Sarah reviewed her notes one more time. The Galactic Council had 847 member species. Each had achieved faster-than-light travel and advanced energy manipulation. Earth wanted to join them and share in their knowledge and protection. The docking bay was enormous. Their entire ship fit into a space that seemed designed for vessels 100 times larger. As they stepped onto the station, Sarah felt the artificial gravity adjust to Earth normal. The air tasted clean, but somehow too perfect. A tall, thin being approached them. It had blue-gray skin and 4 arms. When it spoke, the words came from a small device on its chest, while its mouth moved silently. "Welcome to Nexus Prime. I am Coordinator Velanash of the Reception Committee. Please follow me to the council chambers." They walked through corridors filled with beings Sarah couldn't even begin to understand. Some floated without touching the ground. Others had so many limbs she lost count. A few looked almost human, but with small differences that made them seem alien. The council chamber was a vast dome with seats, arranged in rising circles. Hundreds of different beings sat in groups based on their species. At the center was a raised platform where a massive crystalline being waited. This was Speaker Thamer, leader of the Crystalline Dominion and head of the Galactic Council. "Beings of the Council," Thamer's voice echoed through the chamber without any visible mouth moving. "Today we hear from the species calling itself humanity from the planet they name Earth." Sarah walked to the center platform. She felt thousands of eyes, sensors, and other sensory organs focused on her. Her hand shook slightly as she activated her presentation device. "Honored council members," she began. "Humanity comes before you seeking membership in this great alliance. We have achieved faster-than-light travel and have explored several nearby star systems. We offer our friendship and our willingness to learn from your advanced civilizations." A sound filled the chamber. It took Sarah a moment to realize it was laughter. Not the friendly kind, but the type that comes when someone tells a joke that isn't very funny. One being stood up. It looked like it was made of living metal with red lights for eyes. "Speaker Thamer, with respect, why are we wasting time with this primitive species? Their faster-than-light travel is barely faster than light itself. Our cargo ships move 1,000 times faster." This being was from the Voltar hegemony. Sarah had read about them. They had conquered dozens of star systems using technology so advanced it seemed like magic to humans. Another being rose from a different section. This one looked almost human but with pale purple skin and large black eyes. When it spoke, Sarah heard the words directly in her mind rather than through her ears. "I have scanned their mental patterns," the being said. These humans are chaotic and unpredictable. Their thoughts jump from topic to topic without logical progression. They cannot even agree among themselves on simple matters. How could such a species contribute to galactic civilization? This was a Zephyrian, one of the psychic races. Sarah felt violated knowing this being had read her thoughts without permission. More voices joined in. A plant-like being with dozens of flowering heads swayed as it spoke. Their lifespan is laughably short, barely 100 of their years. By the time they learn anything useful, they die. The botanical collective sees no benefit in associating with such temporary creatures. Sarah tried to respond, but her voice was drowned out by more criticism. Species after species stood to point out humanity's flaws. Their technology was primitive. Their society was violent and divided. Their bodies were weak and fragile. Their minds were too simple to understand advanced concepts. Speaker Thamer finally raised a crystalline arm for silence. The Council has heard the petition from Earth and the responses from our member species. It is clear that humanity is not ready for full membership in the Galactic Council. Sarah's heart sank, but Thamer continued. However, we are not without mercy. We grant Earth observer status. You may attend Council meetings and learn from our proceedings. You may establish a small embassy here on Nexus Prime, but you will have no voice in Council decisions and no protection under galactic law. Observer status? Sarah asked. What does that mean exactly? A different being answered, one that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. It means you can watch little human, like children watching adults discuss important matters. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when your species has grown up, we can revisit this decision. More laughter filled the chamber. Sarah felt her face burning with embarrassment and anger. She wanted to argue, to prove that humans deserved better treatment. But she was one person facing nearly 1,000 advanced civilizations. The council session is closed, Thamer announced. The humans may establish their embassy and begin their observation period. As the massive chamber emptied, Sarah stood alone on the central platform. Dr. Webb and Lieutenant Torres approached her, their faces showing the same disappointment she felt. Well, Dr. Webb said quietly, that went about as badly as it could have. Observer status, Torres muttered. We're like cosmic children at the grown-up table. Sarah straightened her shoulders. Maybe, but children grow up. And sometimes they surprise the adults who underestimate them. She looked around the empty chamber one more time. The beings who had just dismissed humanity as primitive and chaotic didn't know what humans were really capable of. They saw a weakness where there was actually strength waiting to be revealed. As they left Nexus Prime to return to Earth with news of their cosmic irrelevance, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the Galactic Council had made a serious mistake. They had judged humanity by their standards, not understanding that being different didn't mean being inferior. Time would tell who was right. 6 months had passed since Earth received observer status from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Chun had established a small embassy on Nexus Prime with a staff of 12 humans. They attended council meetings and filed reports back to Earth. But mostly they just watched as advanced civilizations discussed matters far beyond human. Understanding. Dr. Webb was reviewing energy consumption, data from the Andorian mining collective when alarms began sounding throughout the embassy. The walls glowed red, and a mechanical voice spoke in dozens of languages. Priority alert. All embassy staff report to emergency stations. Priority alert. Chun rushed to the communications center where Lieutenant Torres was frantically working at multiple screens. What's happening? Long-range sensors have detected something at the galactic rim, Torres said, his face pale. The council is calling an emergency session. Chun and her team hurried to the council chambers. The usual orderly seating arrangement was replaced by chaos. Beings that normally never spoke to each other were huddled in urgent discussions. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. Speaker Thanmar appeared more solid than usual, his crystalline form glowing brighter. Council members, we face a threat not seen for 1,000,000 years. The monitoring stations at Galactic Edge have detected massive energy signatures moving inward from the void. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed the galaxy from above, with thousands of tiny lights representing star systems. At the very edge, dark spots were spreading inward like an infection. The Devourers have awakened, Thamur continued. Our ancestors spoke of them in warnings passed down through millennia. They are not living beings as we understand life. They are machines, ancient beyond measure, that consume entire worlds to fuel their expansion. A Veltar commander stood up. His metallic form gleamed under the chamber lights. How many ships do they have? Unknown, replied a Zephyrian analyst, her large black eyes reflecting the hologram. Our psychic probes cannot penetrate their ships. They appear to be shielded against all forms of mental contact. What we do know is that they move in fleets of thousands. Chun watched as the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy struggled to understand this threat. These beings who had dismissed humanity as primitive were now showing fear she recognized from her own species' history. A plant-like being from the botanical collective swayed nervously. What are their capabilities? The hologram changed to show recordings from the outer rim. Massive black ships, each one the size of a small moon, approached a populated world. Energy beams shot out from the ships and began tearing apart the planet's surface. Within hours, the entire world was stripped down to its core and converted into more ship materials. They adapt, said another analyst. Every weapon we use against them, they learn to counter. Every strategy we employ, they develop responses. They have been dormant for 1,000,000 years, but their technology has continued to evolve while they slept. The chamber fell silent, except for the sound of breathing from species that still needed air. Chun realized that for the first time since arriving at Nexus Prime, she was seeing the Galactic Council afraid. We must mobilize the combined fleet, declared the Veltar commander. Every species will contribute their strongest warships. Over the following days, Chun watched as the galaxy prepared for war. The Veltar brought their world-breaker dreadnoughts, massive ships that could crack planets open with focused gravity beams. The Zephyrians deployed psychic battle coordinators who could think and react faster than light itself. The Botanical Collective grew living ships that could repair themselves even after losing half their mass. The combined fleet was an impressive sight. 50,000 ships of every size and design imaginable gathered in the Nexus system. Some were sleek and efficient, built by species that had perfected the art of war over millions of years. Others were organic creatures bred specifically for battle. With weapons that grew from their flesh, Chun stood in the observation deck of the embassy as the fleet prepared to depart. Dr. Webb joined her, looking worried. They seem confident, he said. They're trying to seem confident, Chun replied. But I've seen that look before. It's the same expression our generals had before major battles back on Earth. Hopeful but scared. The first reports came back 3 weeks later. The combined fleet had engaged Devourer ships near the Proxima Centauri system. The battle lasted 18 hours and ended with the fleet retreating after losing 30% of their ships. The enemy adapts too quickly, reported Fleet Admiral Kethfer of the Crystalline Dominion. Our most powerful weapons damaged them initially, but within minutes they developed countermeasures. Their ships rebuild themselves using matter from destroyed vessels. More battles followed, each one ending in retreat. The Devourers weren't just winning. They were learning from every encounter. They studied galactic tactics and developed responses faster than any military computer could calculate. Entire Civilizations began falling silent. The Rigel Consortium, a trading empire with over 200 worlds, stopped all communications within a month. The Omega Research Network, famous for their scientific achievements, transmitted one last message: they're here. Before their systems went dark, Chun watched the galaxy's most advanced species struggle against an enemy they couldn't understand. The Veltar tried brute force and watched their invincible ships get torn apart. The Zephyrians attempted psychic attacks but found nothing to attack. The Devourers had no minds as living beings understood them. The botanical collective's regenerating ships were simply consumed faster than they could heal. The pattern was always the same. Initial success followed by adaptation and overwhelming counterattack. The Devourers didn't just defeat their enemies. They absorbed everything useful about their tactics and technology. Dr. Webb brought Chun the latest casualty reports. 300 worlds lost this week. At this rate, they'll reach the core systems within 6 months. What about the Council's response? They're getting desperate. Some members are suggesting we wake up the sleeping gods of the Vega system. Others want to try collapsing entire star systems to stop the advance. Chun looked at the latest intelligence reports. The Devourers were massive, organized, and seemingly unstoppable. But something bothered her about their behavior patterns. They're too perfect, she said. What do you mean? Look at their responses. They counter every strategy with mathematical precision. They adapt to every weapon with perfect efficiency. They don't improvise or experiment. They just calculate the optimal response and implement it. Webb frowned. Isn't that an advantage? Maybe. Or maybe it's a weakness we just haven't figured out how to exploit yet. That evening, Chun received an unexpected communication. Coordinator Velanash, the same being who had greeted them when they first arrived, appeared on her private screen. Ambassador Chun, the Council wishes to speak with you. Has Earth's status changed? Velanash hesitated. The Council is exploring all available options, even those previously considered too minor to matter. Chun felt a mixture of hope and dread. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations were losing a war against machines. And now they wanted to talk to the species they had dismissed as primitive 6 months ago. I'll be there within the hour, she said, as she prepared for what might be humanity's second chance to prove itself. Chun wondered if the Council was about to make the same mistake again. They still saw humans as weak and backward. They had no idea what they were really asking for. But perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Someone too primitive to know that certain things were impossible. The Council chamber looked different than it had 6 months ago. The proud beings who had once dismissed humanity now sat with slumped shoulders and dim expressions. Some chairs stood empty. Their occupants, civilizations, had already fallen to the Devourers. Speaker Thamer's crystalline form had lost much of its brightness. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Ambassador Chun, we find ourselves in desperate circumstances. The Devourer advance continues despite our best efforts. We are losing 300 worlds per week. Chun stood in the center of the chamber, the same spot where she had been rejected months earlier. This time, the beings around her looked at her with something that might have been hope. What exactly are you asking of Earth? She said. A Veltar commander leaned forward. Any assistance your species can provide. Ships, weapons, personnel. We know your technology is primitive, but even small contributions might help. Chun had been expecting this conversation. Earth's governments had been monitoring the Galactic War through their embassy reports. They knew what was coming. Earth can provide ships and crews, she said. But you should understand that our methods may not match your expectations. We are beyond the luxury of expectations, said a Zephyrian analyst whose mental voice sounded tired. We will accept any help offered. Within 2 weeks, Earth's response arrived at Nexus Prime. The council members who had gathered to inspect humanity's contribution stared in confusion at what they saw. The human fleet consisted of 300 ships, each one different from the others. Some looked like they had been built in scrapyards using parts from a dozen different technologies. Others appeared to be cargo vessels with weapons bolted onto their hulls. A few seemed to be held together with what humans called duct tape and determination. Admiral Maria Santa stepped off the lead ship, a battered cruiser called the Indomitable. She was a short, stocky woman with gray hair and scars on her hands from working with machinery. To the aliens, she looked nothing like their idea of a fleet commander. "These are your warships?" asked Fleet Admiral Kethver, his crystalline form reflecting the odd collection of human vessels. "They're what we have," Santos replied. "Not pretty, but they get the job done." Dr. Webb, who had returned to serve as liaison, tried to explain. "Humans build differently than other species. We tend to adapt existing designs rather than create perfect new ones." A botanical collective representative swayed nervously. "But how do they function?" "The energy signatures are completely inconsistent." Santos grinned. "That's the idea. No two ships work exactly the same way. Makes it harder for enemies to predict. What we'll do." The alien officers exchanged glances that suggested they thought the humans were either crazy or too primitive to understand proper engineering. First test came at the Kepler defense line, where Devourer scouts were probing the outer perimeter. The combined fleet had arranged itself in perfect formation, massive dreadnoughts in the center, support vessels in precise supporting positions, and fast attack ships on the flanks. Santos looked at the battle plan and shook her head. "This won't work. It is the optimal formation based on 10,000 years of tactical development," Kethver said stiffly. "Maybe against normal enemies. But the Devourers aren't normal. They'll scan your formation, calculate the best response, and tear you apart systematically. Then, what do you suggest?" Santos activated her communicator. "All human ships. This is Admiral Santos. Forget the formation. Spread out and do what you do best. Make it up as you go along." The alien commanders watched in horror as the human fleet scattered like startled fish. Ships moved in seemingly random directions with no apparent coordination. Some dove below the plane of battle. Others climbed high above it. A few simply charged straight at the enemy. "What are they doing?" demanded a Zephyrian coordinator. "This is not tactics. This is chaos." "Wait and see," Santos said calmly. The Devourer ships approached in their usual methodical formation. Their sensors scanned the area, clearly confused by what they found. The human ships weren't behaving according to any recognized tactical doctrine. The first Devourer vessel targeted a human destroyer that was flying in wide circles around the enemy formation. The destroyer's response was to suddenly accelerate directly at the Devourer ship, firing every weapon it had while screaming over the communications channel, "For Earth and the glory of the Terran Marines." The destroyer crashed into the Devourer vessel and exploded, taking both ships with it. The alien observers were shocked. They destroyed themselves. "Captain Rodriguez knew his engines were failing," Santos explained. "So he turned his ship into a guided missile. The Devourers weren't expecting that. More human ships began attacking in ways that made no sense to either the aliens or the Devourers. One cargo ship pretended to retreat, then suddenly reversed course and rammed an enemy vessel. Another group of fighters worked together to herd a Devourer ship into an asteroid field, then collapsed the asteroids on top of it using mining charges. The most confusing tactic came from the frigate. Lucky strike. Its captain, a former asteroid miner named Jake Murphy, had noticed that the Devourers always targeted the most dangerous threat first. So he made his small ship look extremely dangerous by broadcasting fake energy signatures and launching empty missile tubes, while the Devourers wasted time trying to destroy the harmless frigate. The real human attack ships hit them from unexpected angles. "This is madness," muttered a botanical collective observer. "How do they coordinate without proper communication protocols?" Santos pointed to her earpiece. "We're talking constantly. Human pilots never shut up during battle. They share information, insult each other, sing songs, tell jokes, and somehow manage to work together despite the chaos." The battle ended with the Devour scouts retreating, something that hadn't happened in weeks of fighting. The human fleet had lost 30 ships, but they had actually driven off the enemy. In the aftermath, alien salvage crews examined the wreckage. What they found confused them even more. Human ships were full of backup systems, redundant components, and improvised repairs. Nothing was built to specification, but everything worked. "How do you maintain these vessels?" asked a Veltar engineer, staring at a human engine that was held together with metal patches and some kind of adhesive. The human mechanic, a young woman covered in grease, looked confused by the question. "You fix what breaks and improve what doesn't work well enough. Isn't that obvious?" The engineer's red optical sensors flickered. "We build ships to precise standards. When they are damaged beyond acceptable parameters, we replace them with new vessels." "That seems wasteful," the mechanic replied. "This engine has been rebuilt 17 times. It runs better now than when it was new." As reports of the battle spread through the galaxy, something began to change in how other species viewed humanity. The humans had won not through superior technology or perfect tactics, but through adaptability and refusal to accept defeat. Admiral Santos found herself invited to strategy meetings that had previously been restricted to the most advanced civilizations. At first, the alien commanders tried to incorporate human tactics into their existing battle plans. "The humans will take position 7-7 Alpha and provide support fire," announced Kethver during one planning session. Santos laughed. "Admiral, with respect, if you tell my people exactly where to go and what to do, they'll just get confused and start making mistakes. Humans work better when you give them a general goal and let them figure out how to achieve it. But how do you maintain unit cohesion without proper orders?" "We don't maintain unit cohesion. We maintain unit purpose. Every human out there knows the mission. Stop the Devourers. How they do it is up to them." The alien officers struggled to understand this concept. Their entire military philosophy was based on precision, coordination, and following established procedures. The idea of deliberately introducing chaos into battle plans went against everything they had learned. But as more battles were fought with human participation, the results became impossible to ignore. The Devourers, who had adapted to counter every traditional tactic, found themselves unable to predict or respond to human behavior. The machines could calculate optimal responses to logical strategies, but they had no programming for dealing with opponents who deliberately chose suboptimal tactics that happened to work anyway. Dr. Webb summed it up in his report to Earth. "The galaxy has spent millions of years perfecting the art of war. They've become so efficient that they're predictable. Humans never perfected warfare. We just got really good at surviving it. And it turns out that survival skills matter more than perfect tactics when you're facing an enemy that adapts to everything logical you throw at it." As the human fleet prepared for the next engagement, Santos looked out at her collection of mismatched ships and grinned. The Galactic Council still didn't understand what they had unleashed. They thought they were getting a few primitive warships to help with their crisis. What they had actually done was invite humanity's greatest talent to the party, the ability to win fights they had no business surviving. The Devour command ship hung in space like a metallic cancer, 2 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that could tear apart planets. It had been broadcasting tactical data to other Devour forces for weeks, always staying safely behind their front lines. Captain James Murphy studied the intelligence reports with growing frustration. Every attempt to reach the command ship had failed. The Valtar had lost 3 dreadnoughts trying to break through its escort fleet. The Zephyrians couldn't even get close enough for psychic attacks. "It's impossible," declared Commander Kethvar during the strategy meeting. "The ship is too well defended. We should focus on smaller targets." Murphy, a lean man with weathered hands and careful eyes, looked up from the tactical display. "Nothing's impossible, just expensive." The alien officers around the table shifted uncomfortably. They had learned that when humans use the word expensive, they usually meant something that civilized beings wouldn't consider attempting. "What are you proposing?" asked Admiral Santos. "Boarding action," Murphy said simply. "We get inside that ship and take it apart from within." The silence that followed was broken by nervous clicking from a botanical collective representative. "Captain Murphy, that vessel is protected by 20 escort ships and enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. Any approach would be suicide." Murphy grinned. "That's the beauty of it. They won't expect suicide." Dr. Webb, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward. "James, even if you could reach the ship, how would you get inside? Devourer hulls are designed to resist every known cutting tool." "Who said anything about cutting?" Murphy activated his personal communicator. "Rodriguez, you still have those mining charges from the asteroid belt?" A gruff voice replied through static. "Enough to crack open a small planet. Why?" "Because we're going to blow a hole in something much more interesting." The plan that Murphy outlined would have been rejected by any rational military command. A single human ship would approach the Devour command vessel while broadcasting false surrender signals. Once close enough, they would detonate mining explosives against the hull, board through the breach, and capture whatever information they could find before the ship's defenses killed them. The survival probability is approximately 0.03%, calculated as Zephyrian analyst after scanning Murphy's mind for the tactical details. "Sounds about right," Murphy agreed cheerfully. "Who wants to volunteer?" The alien officers stared at him in horror, but every human in the room raised their hand. Santos selected Murphy and 12 Marines for the mission. As they prepared their ship, alien observers watched in fascination and terror. The humans weren't treating this as a desperate last resort. They were approaching it like any other job that needed doing. Lieutenant Maria Vasquez, the team's demolitions expert, was humming while she prepared the mining charges. When asked about her mood, she shrugged. "Better to die doing something useful than sitting around waiting for the enemy to come to us," she said. "Besides, maybe we'll get lucky." The concept of getting lucky during a suicide mission confused most alien observers. But the humans treated it as a normal part of military planning. Sergeant Tom Chun, no relation to Ambassador Chun, was checking his equipment when a botanical collective researcher approached him. "Sergeant, do you understand that this mission will almost certainly result in your death?" Chun looked up from his weapon maintenance. "Yeah, probably. But almost certainly isn't the same as definitely. Sometimes almost certainly doesn't happen." The plant being swayed in confusion. "But statistically, statistics are for people who don't have to actually do the job," Chun interrupted. "I've survived 11 missions that statistics said would kill me. Maybe this'll be number 12. The research team that had been studying human physiology released their preliminary report the day before Murphy's mission launched. The findings explained much about human behavior that had puzzled other species. Human stress responses are completely different from ours. Dr. Kethtai of the Medical Collective explained to the Council. When most species encounter extreme danger, their bodies prepare for either immediate flight or paralysis. Humans do something else entirely. The holographic display showed human brain scans during combat situations. Instead of the expected patterns of fear and shutdown, human nervous systems showed increased activity across multiple regions. They get smarter and faster under pressure, Dr. Keftai continued. Their reaction times improve, their pattern recognition becomes more acute, and their pain tolerance increases dramatically. What we consider debilitating stress, they consider optimal operating conditions. Speaker Thamer's crystalline form flickered with interest. Are you saying that humans perform better when they should be dead? Exactly. Their evolution occurred on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. They developed the ability to function effectively while being hunted, poisoned, starved, injured, and exhausted. Other species develop technology to avoid such conditions. Humans develop biology to thrive in them. The report contained other disturbing facts about human physiology. They had redundant organs, healing rates that bordered on miraculous, and nervous systems designed to keep working even after massive trauma. Most shocking of all, humans could survive injuries that would instantly kill most other sapient species. They have backup hearts, Dr. Keftai said in amazement. Backup circulation systems, backup kidney function, even backup thinking processes. If you damage one part of their brain, other parts take over the same functions. A Zephyrian medical expert expressed the question everyone was thinking. What kind of planet produces beings like this? The answer came from Earth's geological records. Humanity's homeworld had suffered through ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and magnetic field reversals. Life on Earth didn't just survive these catastrophes. It got stronger after each one. Their planet tried to kill them for 4 billion years, Dr. Webb explained. Everything that couldn't adapt went extinct. What survived was incredibly tough and adaptable. Humans are basically the descendants of the most successful survivors in their planet's history. Captain Murphy's mission launched while the Council was still processing these revelations. His ship, the Longshot, approached the Devourer command vessel broadcasting standard surrender codes in 17 different languages. The Devourer escorts scanned the ship and found exactly what they expected. A small human vessel with minimal armament and a crew that was obviously terrified. What they didn't detect were the mining charges hidden in the ship's hull, or the fact that the crew's terror was actually excited anticipation. Devourer vessel? This is Captain Murphy of the Terran ship Longshot, he broadcast as they approached. We surrender and request permission to dock. The response came in mechanical tones that their translators converted to text. Surrender accepted. Dock at port 7. Prepare for processing. Murphy's team exchanged grins. The Devourers had adapted to counter every weapon and tactic thrown at them. But they had no programming for dealing with fake surrenders that were actually real attacks. As the Longshot docked with the command ship, Murphy activated the mining charges. The explosion tore a hole in the Devourer hull large enough to drive a truck through. Before the ship's automated systems could respond, 12 humans in combat armor poured through the breach. What happened next confused every tactical analysis system in the galaxy. The interior of the Devourer ship was a maze of mechanical corridors, filled with defensive systems designed to stop any possible intruder. Automated turrets, energy barriers, and robot sentries should have killed the humans within seconds. Instead, the Marines did something no logical military doctrine could predict. They split up. Sergeant Chun went left, throwing grenades around corners and shooting at anything that moved. Corporal Williams went right, using his engineering training to sabotage power systems while humming an old Earth song. Lieutenant Vasquez went straight ahead, planting explosives on anything that looked important. The Devour defensive systems were designed to track and eliminate coordinated attack forces. They had no programming for dealing with 12 separate individuals who were making up their own objectives as they went. Along contact. Multiple hostiles in Corridor 7. Chun's voice came over the com. Copy that. I'm in engineering, and these machines don't like it when you hit them with hammers. Williams replied cheerfully. Found their main computer core. Setting charges now. Vasquez reported between bursts of gunfire. The most unnerving thing about the human attack wasn't their tactics or their weapons. It was their attitude. They were inside an enemy ship that was trying to kill them, surrounded by hostile machines, and they were enjoying themselves. Murphy to all teams. The captain's voice crackled through static. Data retrieval complete. Time to go. Everyone remember where you parked? The extraction was even more chaotic than the insertion. Some Marines fought their way back to the breach point. Others found their own exit routes by blowing holes in the hull. Corporal Williams actually got lost and had to ask the others for directions while fighting off robot defenders. They escaped just as Vasquez's charges detonated, crippling the Devourer command ship's central systems. The Longshot limped away with battle damage and a crew that was somehow still alive. The Devourer homeworld dominated the view screen like a mechanical nightmare. What had once been a normal planet was now a massive artificial construct. Its surface covered in factories and shipyards that stretched from pole to pole. Dark energy readings suggested the entire world had been converted into a single enormous machine. Admiral Santa stood on the bridge of the flagship, defiant, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled around her. 3 million ships from every surviving civilization had gathered for this final assault. The Veltar contributed their remaining dreadnoughts. The Zephyrians brought psychic warfare vessels that could think faster than light. The Botanical Collective had grown their largest living ship specifically for this battle. At the center of this massive force floated Earth's contribution. 10,000 ships that looked like they had been built in scrapyards and held together with hope and determination. Admiral called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. The Council War Committee is requesting final battle plans. Santos looked at the tactical display showing the Devourer homeworld's defenses. Orbital stations the size of moons surrounded the planet. Energy shields that could deflect Starkiller weapons protected critical facilities. Automated defense fleets waited in perfect formation, ready to counter any attack with mathematical precision. Tell them we're still working on it, Santos replied. That was a lie. Santos knew exactly what they were going to do. The problem was explaining it to beings who thought war should be logical and predictable. The plan had come from an unlikely source, Corporal Williams, the Marine who had gotten lost inside the Devourer command ship. While reviewing the intelligence data they had captured, he had made an observation that strategic computers had missed. The whole thing is one big machine, Williams had said, pointing at the homeworld schematics. And like any machine, if you break the right part, the whole thing stops working. Dr. Webb had been skeptical. Corporal, that facility has been expanding for millions of years. There must be thousands of redundant systems. Sure, but look here. Williams had indicated a series of energy conduits deep within the planet's core. That's not redundant. That's the primary power distribution network. Everything else is secondary. You take that out, and the whole planet goes dark. The problem was reaching those conduits. They were buried beneath kilometers of armor plating and protected by the most sophisticated defense systems in the galaxy. Any conventional assault would be destroyed long before getting close to the target. That's when Santos had proposed what military historians would later call the most audacious battle plan ever conceived. Where? Not going to attack their defenses, she announced to the assembled fleet commanders. We're going to ignore them completely." The alien officers stared at her in confusion. Commander Kethver's crystalline form flickered with agitation. "Admiral, the orbital stations alone have enough firepower to destroy our entire fleet. Only if we give them time to target us properly," Santos replied. "But we're not going to do that." She activated the tactical display, showing the fleet's approach vectors. Instead of the traditional organized formations, the human plan called for something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Every ship will approach the homeworld on a different trajectory at maximum speed. No formations, no coordination, no predictable patterns. Just 10,000 separate attacks happening simultaneously. A Zephyrian analyst spoke up, her mental voice strained. "That's not tactics. That's organized chaos. How will you coordinate targeting? How will you avoid friendly fire?" "We won't coordinate anything," Santos said cheerfully. "Each ship will pick its own target and do whatever seems like a good idea at the time." The alien commanders looked at each other in horror. What Santos was proposing violated every principle of civilized warfare. It was messy, inefficient, and completely unpredictable, which was exactly the point. The Devourers adapt by analyzing our tactics and calculating optimal responses, Dr. Webb explained. But you can't analyze tactics that don't exist. You can't calculate responses to strategies that are being made up on the spot. The battle began with what appeared to be complete disaster. The human ships scattered in all directions, moving at speeds that seemed suicidal. Some dove directly at the planet's surface. Others looped around the orbital defenses in spiraling patterns that made no geometric sense. A few seemed to be flying backward while shooting at anything that moved. The Devourer defense systems immediately began their analysis routines. Computers that had successfully countered every attack for millions of years started calculating optimal response patterns. They tracked incoming vectors, analyzed weapon signatures, and prepared coordinated defensive measures. Then the calculations failed. There were too many variables. Too many unpredictable elements. The humans weren't following any recognizable tactical doctrine because they weren't following any doctrine at all. Each ship was fighting its own private war according to rules that changed every few seconds. Captain Rodriguez, flying the modified cargo hauler Stubborn Mule, found himself facing 3 Devourer interceptors. Instead of engaging in normal combat, he broadcasted a message on all frequencies. "Hey, you metal morons want to dance? Let's dance." Then he started playing Earth music at maximum volume while spinning his ship in random patterns and firing every weapon he had. The Devourer ships tried to calculate his attack pattern and found themselves attempting to analyze the mathematical properties of a song called Sweet Home Alabama. Meanwhile, the frigate Lucky 7 discovered that Devourer targeting systems had difficulty tracking ships that were technically falling apart. Captain Murphy had ordered his crew to jettison non-essential equipment while approaching the orbital stations, creating a debris field that confused enemy sensors. "Are we supposed to be losing this many pieces?" asked his navigator nervously. "Only if we're doing it right," Murphy replied, watching another hull panel drift away into space. "Don't worry, we'll hold together long enough to shoot something important." The most successful attack came from an unexpected source. The transport ship Cafeteria Lady had been converted from a civilian vessel and was crewed entirely by former cooks and food service workers. When they found themselves facing a Devourer battle station, they did what came naturally. "Incoming hostiles. All hands to battle stations," announced Captain Martha Stewart, a former mess hall supervisor. "Captain," called her weapons officer, "we don't have battle stations. This is a converted cargo ship. Then we'll make our own battle stations. Johnson, you take weapons. Peterson, you handle navigation. Rodriguez, start throwing things at them." What followed was the most improvised space battle in recorded history. The crew used cargo loading equipment to launch improvised projectiles at the enemy while simultaneously trying to figure out how their weapon systems worked. They succeeded in disabling the battle station not through superior tactics, but through sheer unpredictability and determination. As the human fleet tore through the Devourer defenses like a force of nature, the alien observers watched in amazement. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Crews that should have been dead kept finding new ways to cause damage. Tactics that should have failed somehow worked anyway. The breakthrough came when Corporal Williams, now commanding his own ship, located the power conduits deep within the planet's core. Getting to them required flying through the planet's internal structure, a network of mechanical tunnels filled with automated defenses. "This is Williams to all ships," he broadcast. "I found the target, but I need backup. Anyone feel like taking a trip through the inside of a giant machine?" The response was immediate. 50 human ships volunteered for what amounted to a guided tour through hell. They followed Williams into the planet's depths, fighting their way through defensive systems that had been designed to stop armies. The journey to the core was a running battle, through kilometers of mechanical corridors. Ships had to navigate around massive moving parts while fighting off swarms of defender drones. Some vessels were lost to automated weapons. Others were crushed by closing blast doors. A few simply got lost in the maze of tunnels, but enough survived to reach the target. The power distribution core was a sphere of pure energy suspended in the center of the planet. Destroying it required precise timing and more explosives than any sane person would carry into an enclosed space. "All ships, this is Williams. On my mark, everyone shoot everything they have at the big glowy ball. 3, 2, 1, mark!" The combined firepower of 20 human ships struck the core simultaneously. The explosion that followed was visible from orbit as the entire planet convulsed. Power grids failed across the surface. Automated factories shut down. Defense systems went offline. The Devourer homeworld, which had been expanding for millions of years, suddenly stopped growing. But the humans weren't finished. As the planet's defenses collapsed, the rest of the fleet swarmed over the surface like angry insects. They didn't just attack the remaining facilities, they dismantled them piece by piece, making sure nothing could be rebuilt. The battle ended not with a glorious victory explosion, but with the systematic deconstruction of the galaxy's greatest threat by beings who treated impossible tasks as normal working conditions.